Hello, my name is Caleigh Carpenter, and I teach at the new Prairieville High School in Ascension Parish. What I am most passionate about as an educator is just that, passion. My love and passion for teaching and history is what truly engages my students in my classroom. Showcasing my passion allows me to build relationships and connections with my students that motivates and drives them to research, to analyze and question historical events and patterns, thus molding productive and passionate citizens of society who want to research, analyze, and question events that surround them in everyday life. In the lesson that you're about to see, my 10th and 11th grade U.S. history students will be in groups analyzing events surrounding the Vietnam conflict. Before my students start to dissect their various sources, I will have the students work together on a placemat activity that has them reviewing over key people, places, ideas, and events of Vietnam that were previously taught. This allows students to reinforce and clarify essential information and concepts before deep diving into the documents. Using a graphic organizer, like a placemat, allows students to have all of the important information in one place that can be referenced back to if needed throughout the lesson. Once a placemat is complete and reviewed, students will analyze primary and secondary sources about the conflict in Vietnam, both at home and abroad. As students summarize the events, they will be making connections to previous lessons on the credibility gap that emerges as a result of this conflict. My goal is for students not only be able to describe the events they are dissecting, but also explain how these events contributed to the credibility gap.
All right, guys, so what we're going to have today is we got two big things that we're going to be doing. We need to review over Vietnam, and then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that credibility gap. So our goal today is for you to be able to explain to me how events during the Vietnam War affected the perception of the U.S. government and contributed to that credibility gap. So when we say affected perception, whose perception are we talking about? Whose point of view is going to be changing about the war? The people, us, the people of America, all right? So we're trying to figure out how that events of the Vietnam War, which we're going to do two things to figure that out. One, we're going to review over the events that we've already talked about, that we've done in class. We're going to use this placemat activity to be able to review over some of those important concepts of Vietnam. And then the second activity that we're going to do today is going to dive a little bit deeper into the protesting during Vietnam. It's going to dive in deeper into the information that the government was giving us. And it's also going to look at some of the events that become uncovered later, okay? So, the biggest goal here is to understand how those events affected our perception of U.S. government, and then how that leads us to the credibility gap. So when we say credibility gap, okay, let's back it up. When something is credible,
it's reliable.
It's trustful, it's reliable, okay?
It's the people wondering if the government is trustworthy.
There we go. We're wondering if the government is trustworthy, okay? So when we say credibility gap, that means that when we say gap, there's something that's in the middle of it, right? It's spreading it apart that is not working, okay? So credibility gap means that our trust between us and the government is widening. There's a gap between what we can trust between them and us, what they're telling us and what we're seeing. I believe we talked about that with the living room war, right? What is everybody seeing on the TVs? People dying. But what is LBJ saying? We're winning. But what's happening with the amount of soldiers that are going into Vietnam? What do we look at in that graph?
It's increasing over time.
It's increasing over time. So if we're winning the war, why are we increasing our men? Why are we needing that? If we're almost at the end of it and we're about to be done with it, then why are we increasing our troops and being more involved? So what we're seeing on TV versus what the government is telling us is creating that credibility gap. All right, guys, so what you're going to be doing is working with your group on your placemat chart. So real quick, I'm going to go over each of the parts so that you understand what you need to do. In this first part, you're labeling the map of Vietnam. You're giving me the leader, the name of that country. So like the top part of Vietnam we know is North Vietnam. So you would label that as the country. Then you're going to give me the leader, and you're going to give me the ideology. So remember that ideology is the belief system. So that's economic, that's political. What was North Vietnam, like what was their main economic and political ideology? And then you're going to give me the leader's name, and then you're going to jump down to the bottom and do the exact same thing. So what is this country going to be called for when you're labeling it as the country? So that'd be South Vietnam. Okay, so for that second one, you're going to do South Vietnam. Give me the leader of that country and then that ideology as well.
Okay, so right here it says identify the tactics and strategies for U.S. forces.
Okay. Yeah. So us sending troops is a strategy. You could use
Would this
that.
be one? The legislation that allows the president to take all necessary measures to protect.
But that so
Or
all,
is it just like giving them power?
that's just giving them the power to do what they need.
So
that's not
So let's talk about this. How about you find where is it where it talks about Viet Cong and like their tactics? Right there. All right, start there. So what are the things that the Viet Cong do?
They use tunnel
Spike
systems.
traps.
Okay, so I would put it. Okay, so those are the tactics that I'm referring to. So like tunnel systems, the booby traps, right? So how did we respond to the Viet Cong's booby traps and spikes?
Oh, we got the airplanes.
Yeah.
The airplanes and we killed the planes.
What's it called?
No, I don't know what it is.
Gas. Something.
No, it's an acid. It starts with an A.
Okay, where can you go? Where do we have it?
Your notes.
It's somewhere in your notes. Look where the Viet Cong is. It's going to talk about what they did and how we reacted to it.
Oh, Agent Orange.
What note was it?
The one that you were just
No,
on.
it's four.
When we were talking about the Viet Cong, right here, when we were talking about the spikes and stuff, then it says US tried to expose tunnels by.
Agent.
Is it just Agent Orange?
Yeah.
I think we also put something else, right?
Napalm.
What did they do? What was
Okay. So then what did you do?
like the credibility stuff she was talking about?
Have you?
Because the government wasn't saying.
What's another one?
Oh.
Okay, there's also this.
The dominant theory, like if one country falls to communism, they all fall to communism. So should I for yourself to watch back? Since the US is afraid that like all the countries falling into communism, that they're gonna start fighting to keep other countries under that like.
And all the media was providing credibility.
So as long as you stick like that, then you should be good. Yeah. How y'all doing, Jack? Fred? Oh, bless you. You okay? Okay. Okay, so for this one, y'all put Operation Rolling Thunder. So like, how is that a tactic? Because I would call that more of an event. So can you explain to me why it's a strategy or a tactic?
Wasn't that like a...
All right, so where did you find it in your notes? Okay, so this is our first bombing campaign, right? So what would the tactic be if that's what we're doing here? We are. So I want you to just be a little less like, this is the event that would be good to put under LBJ. Because that's the operation. So what that means is that that's like the plan of action. So the strategy going behind that plan of action would be heavy bombing. Okay, so where did you find these two? So if you keep reading with Vietnam guerrilla warfare, if you keep going, it talks about how the U.S. what we did against the Viet Cong. So Nixon starts here.
That's not what I'm asking.
Oh,
Starts here?
yeah, this is Nixon. Oh. So like the My Lai massacre is one that you could put down.
Ricky, y'all see your paperwork? Can this, can I put this as
Hmm? Yeah. How we doing? Are we? Okay, so.
Girl, it's listening.
No, right there. So the little cartoon. Okay. Well, that was quick. I didn't even have to give you any pointers or anything. So what is it?
I was thinking about you and your.
Oh, and our costumes? I'm glad that that's what triggered your thought process there.
Surprise attack. Wait, you made the effect. Opposite.
That's fine. That's right. It's an E. You just put domino theory if you don't want to put effect, but it's the same thing. Okay, but you have to describe that to me. So what is the domino effect? Okay, and so why would that make us get more involved?
Because they don't want them to spread a comment. They want to keep
That's right.
I think I don't know this stuff like whenever I take a test. And the chart can help you which leaders. Which side is the north? Okay. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. I have it on like right here. This side's the north, and this is the south. And it's showing which one is communism and communism and the leaders.
I put that they had the tear gas fills up the campus as they have an angry protest on the campus of Kent State University.
Okay.
And then also the police respond to a sniper fire that they saw on JSU campus, and they have the fire still going as well.
Okay, so how that, when you were reading that, like, how were you feeling about that?
I feel like college is supposed to be a place that you enjoy and get experience. But you have to watch your friends get shot and stuff like this. It's not a good experience.
Okay.
Yes, so I had to look at the anti-war. They were demonstrators, and then 100,000 people organized by the national. No, I didn't even like committee to end war in Vietnam, and then I didn't read it all.
Good. Okay, so you're showing me the different types of protests. Okay.
And I have said that my personal reaction to this document is I support the universal reaction to like protesters and against war.
Okay.
All right, guys. So we're gonna look at the last column on your sheet here, and this is gonna be our closer for today to kind of wrap up our activity. Ooh. So through all the sources that you've done so far today, I want you to tell me, and you're gonna pick one event that you and your group has discussed or looked at that you feel contributed to the credibility gap or the distrust of government. So thinking back on the sources that you completed today, okay, looking back at the sources that you completed today, just pick one event that you looked at. This could be the massacre, this could be the Tet offense, this could be, oh y'all give me something else because I'm drawing a blank. Operation Rolling Thunder, thank you Jackson. The Kent State protesting. So you're going to pick one of these events that you looked at through the sources, and you're explaining to me how that event widened the credibility gap. And you're going to do that in that right side of the chart. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So when you do this, you have to identify and describe the event, and then explain how it led to the credibility gap, how it widened the credibility gap. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that.
I chose that the Days of Rage were like the most, like, had the most significant contribution to the credibility gap because it showed that the police were willing to use like super unnecessary force and like were even killing people over just like a protest, which you're supposed to be able to do safely.
Okay. So make sure you tell me how that leads to that distrust then, okay? All right, guys, which one did y'all end up going with?
The first.
You can use this whole, like you don't have to, it doesn't have to be right here. I left it open so that you can write as much as you want it, okay? So y'all went with the first one with the images? Okay. All right, so what event are some of y'all writing on? What are some of the ideas that y'all are thinking about?
The living room war,
Okay, what about it?
where they were like, that the government was saying one thing, but they were showing another.
Okay,
Like, news.
it's like that role of media in your living room? Okay, that sounds good. At the end of the lesson, my students were given time to write a constructive response that assessed the learning target and also practice a skill that they'll see on the U.S. History LEAP exam. After sorting and analyzing the student work, I was able to determine that a majority of my students were able to correctly describe events of the Vietnam conflict, pull appropriate evidence when needed from the sources, and explain how these events contributed to the credibility gap. Though I had a few students who were unable to correctly explain, those students were able to describe the events of Vietnam and relate those events to the credibility gap. My next steps will be to focus on the skills, specifically explaining and making connections to both the how and why. My plan is to do a mini writing workshop in which students will analyze peer responses, create feedback for the response based on the LEAP rubric, and then give an opportunity to self-reflect on their own constructive responses.